It's 2025 and a new year means brand new opportunities. And for a lot of you out there, I know you've been thinking about one thing over the holidays, and that is starting your own business. But you have so many questions like, how do I get started? How do I come up with a brand? How do I even sell stuff to people? And what am I even going to sell? Now take a deep breath. Shopify has got you. Shopify makes it simple to create your brand, open for business, and get your first sale. And you can get your store up and running easily with thousands of customizable templates. You don't have to be a coding nerd or a design geek to get this done. All you need to do is drag and drop. Shopify also helps with the details like shipping, taxes, and payments from one single dashboard, so you can focus on the important stuff, like growing your business. Established in 2025 has a nice ring to it, doesn't it? Sign up for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/truecrime, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/truecrime to start selling with Shopify today. Shopify.com/truecrime.
I'm Alice.
And I'm Brett.
And this is the Prosecutor's Legal Briefs. Welcome back to the Prosecutor's Legal Briefs. I'm your host, Alice, and I'm joined, as always, by the even-handed Brett and our fascinating guest, Bob Motta from Defense Diaries podcast. Welcome, Bob. I guess we're okay to have Brett on as well this time.
I mean, I feel like it's mandatory at this point. Thank you for having me. I love that you're here, Alice. As you know, you weren't able to join us in our last little soiree, so I'm excited to hang with you tonight.
So excited. And you guys should know that the even-handed descriptor for Brett came from Bob himself. I literally don't know if you can give a higher compliment coming from defense counsel for a prosecutor.
It's true.
Brett,
it's
be
true.
Careful.
They knew it didn't come from you, Alice. That was way too kind.
It was way too kind.
And it's true. It's very true. It's very true.
Well, we are super excited to have you, Bob.
Well,
It's always so great to have you, especially with this huge trial. Everybody's been hearing our point of view, getting the prosecutor's point of view, but we're really interested to hear what you think about all this craziness. You know, we're going to open the door so you can talk, but it could close at any time. But it might open again.
Look at that.
You never know.
Opening the door.
Yeah.
For the Murdaugh Trial. I'd love to hear everything you have to say, Bob.
I'm all about it. And, you know, obviously anybody out there that's listeners of our shows, we'd love to have you guys ask questions, you know, so let's make it as interactive as possible. I'm sure Brett will really... See, I'm too vain, so I'm not wearing my cheaters, so I'll have to squint in order to see the comments. So Brett will have to MC that portion. Well, I mean, it's a crazy trial, you know. I mean, every trial is crazy in one way or another, but this thing is next level. You know, kind of the thing that has been so just unbelievable to me is the number of like just kind of lawyers type issues. You know, you've got the 404B stuff with the prior bad acts, and that was such a big deal. And like the interplay, like is us all being attorneys kind of wondering how they're going to intertwine those two cases together, because you basically have two trials happening at one time. You've got the homicides, and then you've got, you know, the financial crimes trial, which, you know, they have to try to interweave, which was mandatory for them to get in order to be able to prove that motive, you know, because we all know motive isn't necessary to get a verdict, but we also know that juries like to know why somebody did something. So, you know, you can see, and especially with a motive like that, had they not been able to get that stuff in, it would have been, I don't know what they would have done, to be honest with you. And then everything yesterday that blew up, like, cause I've been on Law and Crime quite a bit as kind of a talking head on there. And I was on Tuesday. So when all that stuff happened yesterday, I was like, oh man, I can't believe I'm not on today. Today is the day, because it was crazy. And, you know, I was sitting there, and as a defense attorney, I'm like, oh my gosh, Jim just completely screwed up when he opened the door, you know, and I guess, and I want to ask you guys as prosecutors, did you think that he opened the door with, because it was very limited what he said about bringing up Cousin Eddie,
Well, I think
and let's set this up real quick, Brett, just in case. I don't think anyone doesn't know what we're talking about, but let's just talk about how, in terms of motive, remember Cousin Eddie, the guy who was hired to shoot. Actually, before I move on, Bob, the most important question we're going to ask you all night. How do you say the defendant's name?
Well, prior to the trial, I said it Murdaugh. Now I say it Murdoch.
Well, but his first name. There's arguments about his first name.
Same deal. Alex, the way it's spelled, but now I say it Alec. It's
okay. I'm sorry. We've been having this long. Nobody knows how to say his name.
I'm a big phonetic guy. I say things like when the Moscow thing. Of course, I was saying Moscow, and I got like a bunch of people. Hey, it's Moscow. I'm like, well, then drop the W.
Yeah,
right.
People pronounce it however they want. I'm not going to change the way I pronounce it. So
we're going to pronounce it many different ways tonight. So y'all just hang on to your hats in the comments. But let me just set this up real quick. And so, of course, the judge yesterday said, no, you can't bring in that information about the murder for suicide hire. And then, of course, there was the 180 ruling today because supposedly the defense opened the door. And we've heard that term a lot in this trial, opening the door. And so just setting it up for everybody. Okay, so did the defense open the door, Brett?
So I think, well, first of all, I think there are two separate doors that, you have to talk about. There's the financial door and there's the roadside shooting door. And I think the defense always knew the motive stuff was going to come in. And they always knew that their strongest argument is, why would this man, just imagining him kill his son and his wife, it's very difficult to imagine. So that was always going to be the strongest thing. That was a risk they had to take. If it opens the door, it opens the door. Whatever, it's probably going to come in anyway for motive. Like you said, case like this, motive is so important, it's going to come in. The roadside thing, though, I'm really interested in your thoughts on this, Bob, because as you said, that wasn't coming in. And I get it that if he didn't do it, somebody did. This is not one of those cases where you have to prove a crime happened, which, a lot of cases, first you got to prove there was a crime. It's a fraud case or anything like that. The first step is prove a crime. Well, here we know there's a crime, so somebody committed it. And so I get trying to point to a viable alternative suspect and going this whole, maybe the drug gang did it because they weren't getting paid thing. I understand why that was something that they wanted to consider doing. But to me, once you mention him and once you bring him up and once you suggest that maybe he was involved, the fact that actually, no, he goes so far as to help Alec commit insurance fraud by shooting him in the head, which I'm still not sure that it really was insurance fraud, but whatever. I don't know how you can't.
Don't go there yet, because we're definitely going to go on to that subject. Look, the way that I thought it played out, so I did happen to be online, and I've been watching it anyway, even though I should be writing episodes. I've been kind of like sucked into watching the trial, especially because I'm going on the show. So when Marion Proctor, Maggie's sister, testified on Tuesday, it was like it began as I expected. She's basically a proof of life witness, and she's turning Maggie into a human being for the jurors, so that they understand she was a loving woman, a wonderful mother, wonderful wife, all that stuff. And then, it gets to this thing where at some point they bring up the roadside shooting is broached. The objection happens. They have a long sidebar. They excuse the jury, and the judge has basically an offer of proof where he asks her, what are you going to testify to? Okay, because they had argued that they had opened the door just by way of mentioning that fact on cross. So, because this all happened during the redirect when they put her on, because they're like, oh my gosh, are we going to bring it up? And so when they did that, and then when Waters gets up, and when Creighton Waters gets up on redirect after the judge basically says, I'm letting it in. Okay. So he basically said, I felt you open the door, and I'm going to let him, delve into the subject matter. And he starts and he questions her, and he stops like one question short of why, like what changed your perception of Alec? And I was like, I'm like, he didn't ask the question. Like all of us, like we were watching that on Law and Crime, like we were off camera or whatever. And like and we were all defense attorneys. Like, you didn't ask the question. We were losing our minds. And we're like, so at that point, I didn't know if the judge was going to keep the door open or not, meaning was he going to allow further evidence going into the next day? Because that was it for that day, remember? So at that point, I'm thinking, man, they like what the jury now thinks is that this was a legitimate attempt on Alec Murdaugh's life. Like that was the way it left, because he didn't ask that question of why, like what made you change his mind? Well, I found out that it was an insurance scam, that he'd hired somebody to, to kill him. And, so when they didn't hear that and they left it as if, that somebody came up on him and shot him, and, that changes the entire perspective of the trial. That became huge for me. I'm like, they just won the trial, or at the very least, it's a hung jury right there, and so then when he comes out, the judge the following morning, and basically rules in favor of the defense on the motion in limine as to the roadside shooting. Like, any more information coming out, I'm like, oh, I was like, they won. I'm like, so if I'm, Poot, I'm saying, hey, I'm telling everybody on the team, especially Jim, do not bring up Eddie ever under any circumstance. Do not touch him with a 50-foot pole, because you're in peril. And so when he did it, and even though I don't think he went to the extent to where I think he kicked open the door, and it goes to what you were saying, Brett, like, there are two doors. There's the financial door, which I think is wide open, and then there's the homicide door. And, just bringing up Eddie's name in conjunction with the opioids, which is all that it was brought up with in that context. It wasn't brought up with respect to anything having to do with the roadside shooting, but the judge, he's like, you introduced a third party of a potential suspect, another dude that may have done it. I think that the state has the opportunity to be able to delve into that now, because now you've brought up this person the jury is hearing about for the first time, and they have no idea who they are. So, man, it was a devastating blow for the defense. And, and I was talking about today, I think they have to lean into it now. I think that they have to try to lean into that now that it's all out there, but like, my mindset is like, look, if I'm defending the case, because there was a lot of people on Twitter, Brett, and I don't know if you saw it, that were saying maybe the defense opened the door on purpose, or reopen the door on purpose, in order to try to goad the state into putting Eddie on. I'm like, nah, I mean, they have that recording. They have the recording of Alec calling with his two attorneys and basically confessing to the roadside shooting. So I was like, that's not it, man. There's no way that you're doing that. It was just like, I don't think that Griffin thought that he went so far that it was gonna bite him like that, man. And it's like, I've been there during a trial where you've done something where it could just be something as small as a word or something that you've said that it just turns everything. And then like that feel, like he must have been in like nightmare world last night or the night before, just like thinking about it. And he goes and writes the brief and he's looking up case law, just like, so I don't know, man, that thing played out. It was unbelievable though. Absolutely unbelievable.
Yeah. He wouldn't have recited everything he heard on YouTube this morning if that was intentional. I mean, he was trying to force that door closed again. And I'll say this about it. I think you're 100% right. Now they should lean into it. And the argument I would make is the prosecution's entire theory is that Alec Murdaugh was willing to sacrifice his wife and his child for himself. Purely selfish thing. Here, the prosecution has shown you that he was willing to die for his son. He was willing to die to make Buster's life better. That's how far he's willing to go for the people he loves. And that is completely inconsistent with the motive they've presented. So that's the argument I would make if I was them.
That's
and frankly,
exactly what you must have been watching me on Law and Crime. That's exactly what I said, man. That was like, that's it. That is the,
there's
the
two
argument,
sides
right?
to everything. You got to lean in. And Bob, you're so right. You said something right there, especially having been in the courtroom and probably been in that situation. I think people really think that trials are scripted. They absolutely aren't, especially when you're in situations of cross-examination. I mean, the defense always, you start the trial with cross-examination, right? Your case is cross-examination because the prosecution puts it on. And cross-examination is truly one of the hardest things, I think, to do well as an attorney. And so that's why I have incredible respect for defense attorneys, because you're having to build your case on cross-examination. Obviously, you have the police reports, but we all know when people take the stand, it is just a circus. You never know exactly what's going to happen. It's wild. And everyone always recites to us, oh, a lawyer never asks a question they don't know the answer to. That's all you do on cross-examination. I mean, truly. Exactly. I mean, you do the best you can to cabin it, right? But that is your job, is to be smart enough to know which risks are worth taking. And so when people, I've seen a lot of tweets that are like, oh, they absolutely, he did it on purpose. I think what you just said was so humanizing. And that's that trial is a live animal. And as the defense, cross-examining real live witnesses who are not experts, right? They are fact witnesses. They never expect to be on the stand. They never expect to be in a murder trial.
Right.
You don't know what's going to happen. And sometimes you get in a flow and you don't know what's coming out of your mouth.
Right.
I mean, there is not a lot of time to think of your next answer. And, I've also seen some people say, they're taking so long. They look at their notes. I'm like, heck yeah, look at my notes. Like, this is hard stuff.
Right.
I'm having to keep 4 weeks worth of information in my head.
Right.
And try to anticipate 10 steps ahead as well. So I love that you brought that up, because I think it humanizes attorneys, and it also brings the reality of what's happening at trial and why trials are like the ultimate reality show.
Oh man. And it's like, like all the true crime content out there, you'll go through like a 6-part docuseries about a crime, and then they cram the trial into like the last 15 minutes. I'm like, man, they're missing the boat. I'm like, they're missing the boat, because that is the number one, the culmination of the case. But that's where everything is laid out. Like that's where everything happens. And I'm always talking about it on my pod. I'm like, you know what? It's like, for us as attorneys, we know, but all the action, like the guts of any trial, happen in all the pretrial motions. That's when we're fighting with each other about what's getting in and what's not getting in terms of evidence. That's like the bones of any case in terms of the trial are all fought prior to the trial itself. I'm like, at some point, somebody's going to figure that out, like in TV world, and start, they'll start having those things on TV streaming as well, because it really is where the fight is. It's like, even leading up to when you get to the point where your emotions eliminate, but that is like what is going to get introduced and what's going to be admissible is huge, and it's like, and it's kind of like a forgotten art, as far as the public is concerned. But as far as we're concerned as lawyers, we know that that's the guts of the case, in terms of what's going to be admissible and what's not. So, it's like you were saying, Alice, like they knew long, long ago. Yeah, they were going to fight it, obviously, for the record, for the appellate record. And for you kids out there that don't know, if you don't raise an issue at trial by objecting, for the most part, it's waived, for appeal purposes. So like that, when you get irritated, when you hear lawyers objecting, they're not doing, I mean, sometimes they're doing it to bust the other lawyer's flow, for sure. But, it's really mandatory, because if you don't object to certain things when evidence is, either being introduced or things that are said, if it's hearsay and they don't think that it should be in, like when you get the, asked and answered types, of objections, those are really just to stop the flow and kind of keep the thing going, because no one's ever getting anything reversed on a asked and answer objection. But, those types of things, kind of the minutia of trials, and why they're so important. Because it's like everyone was like, why do they take so long to open the boxes? I'm like, well, the chain of custody, I know it's, it's the nature of the beast. The chain of custody requires that when it comes into that courtroom, it has to be pristine, because otherwise the defense attorney's gonna be like, somebody tampered with that. It's open. Why is it? You know what I mean? So it's like, yes, it takes 15 minutes to open a box, and it doesn't make for compelling TV, but unless you've got stipulations in terms of, both sides agreeing to allow something in without putting up a fight about it or laying a foundation, then, it's kind of what you have to do. So, yeah, to me, it's all fascinating, and I always wonder if it's just because I'm a lawyer. I don't know.
Well, everybody wanted us to cover this case, and we kept saying, well, we will once the trial happens. Once the trial happens, the story is not complete at all. And in fact, I think we've learned so much more about really everything that people have been speculating about for the last 2 years. You mentioned, this has been a little bit slow. I think there's not been a lot of cooperation between the sides. I don't remember. I feel like you were saying that, Bob, that when you prosecute a case, you don't really stipulate to anything either. You make them do all the.
It depends, man. If it's like bank records, we'll stipulate it, and it depends on how long the trial's going. You know what I mean? It's like I'm obviously cognizant of not trying to, bore the jury to death to where where we've lost them collectively. We want to keep them engaged because, frankly, they're the most important people in the courtroom. So, in terms of that, but it was one of the rules my dad, taught me coming into the practice of law. He's like, don't ever stipulate to anything. you know, and I'm like, well, sometimes you have to stipulate in order to just kind of keep the train moving,
Well, they're definitely, I think they stipulated to something today, and Harpootlian even made a joke about how, I know this is shocking, but we think we can actually reach an agreement on this to save some time. Because, I was talking about this on one of our episodes. The poor Snapchat lady had to fly in from San Francisco just to authenticate the Snapchat and stuff like that.
Exactly.
Did we really need that witness? But anyway, so we're nearing, the prosecution's about to close, I would think, but they're about to rest. They said they were going to do it on Wednesday. It's Thursday. They haven't done it yet because doors keep getting opened, so they keep having new witnesses. But yeah. I think we've seen enough that you can sort of make a judgment here. What do you think? How is the prosecution done? Do you think they've proven their case? Are they where they want to be, or do you think they've left some big holes?
Man, you know what? I keep having this discussion with Allison, my wife, who's also an attorney, and I'm like, I mean, strip everything away, and let's keep in mind that this particular jury was not armed with notebooks, and we're now in the 4th week of a trial. So a lot of what they heard over the last 3 and 4 weeks has come and gone. Now, of course, during closing, both sides will hit the high notes, but a lot of what they've heard. So you have to kind of look at what you think will stick. So in terms of what I think will stick with them, obviously they've been able to establish that Alec Murdaugh is a massive liar. They're an admitted liar even, they know he's a liar. The question then becomes, because he's a liar, does that make him a murderer? Right. So, they kind of Harpootlian tried to front the whole, I wasn't at the kennel lie in openings. I don't know if you guys recall that, but in the opening, he basically said, look, he initially lied to the police about his presence in the kennel that night. And, but still, it's like, is the jury remembering that, or are they remembering the fact that they heard the audio and, from the video, and they clearly hear, and the state did a very good job on putting 5 or 6 voice recognition, voice identification witnesses on to say, whose voice is that? How many voices do you hear? Whose voice is that? What percentage, are you feeling that is in terms of your, is it him? Yes, I'm 100% on it. So in terms of that, I think that was a big piece of evidence. I think that I'm worried for the state side of it, in the sense that I don't know how the financial stuff's going to play out. It's like, I think they kind of created the nexus. I thought that Mark Tinley, who was the attorney for the Beaches, or was that her last name, Mallory Beach? For them was a very effective witness, in the sense that he kind of tied it together. Now, Allison and I, my Allison, not Alice, had a pretty heated debate. She's like, I don't think he tied anything together. I'm like, I think he did, because he basically was showing, because the whole concept of knowledge in terms of the defense being able to say it was somebody else that did it, his clients had to know. And I thought that the state did a good job that his clients didn't know that he had committed these crimes. He was telling his clients, well, I'm still working on the settlement, or we're trying to negotiate liens still. So they didn't know that he had stolen the money per se. You know what I'm saying? So as far as that goes, there's no quick answer here, Brett. I mean, I don't know. I feel like my gut right now is, if the trial ended, it's a hung jury, just based on the fact of where it's located. Because did they not file a change of venue? Do you guys know? Why is it being held in that county? I don't understand.
Well, I don't. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure the defense didn't file one, but I don't know. It's weird.
Maybe they thought because the AG's office is prosecuting.
It depends on which side of the conspiracy you believe, right? Because maybe the AG's office thinks all those people are sick of the Murdaughs, and this is the opportunity to get rid of them. But maybe the Murdaughs think, well, we own these jurors, so they're going to go our way. I mean, who knows? Exactly. I guess we'll see.
It's weird.
But I don't know whether there was one or not.
Well, Bob, I want to ask this because you brought it up, and a lot of people have talked about motive, and you're tying to it with the financial information. So you think it would be a hung jury if it ended today? How do you think the jury is buying the motive? What do you think the motive is coherent? Do you think it's believable? Obviously, you have questions about it because you think it'll be hung, but I'd love to hear your thoughts as a defense attorney on the, motive here.
Well, I'm gonna like flip the script and ask you guys, what do you guys as prosecutors, what do you think of that motive? Would you be thrilled going to trial with that motive?
I mean, yeah, because I think that's absolutely why I did it. I mean, that's the thing. Like, to me, it makes perfect sense. Like, I'm a little surprised that people are surprised by it, because, if he killed his son and his wife, he did it for a reason. It's not like he just woke up that morning and decided to do it. And I think the reason, given the timing of everything, that's the day his law firm tells him about the $700,000. His father has his incident. The boat case is about to get going, and he knows about all these millions of dollars are going to be uncovered if nothing changes. I think he was in a really desperate strait. I don't know exactly what he was thinking. People have speculated, was he killing Maggie so he'd have more control over their finances? Was he killing her because he was afraid when she found out she would turn on him or try and divorce him? I mean, was he killing Paul to try and put an end to the boat case because he knew, as Mark Tinsley said, if somebody kills your wife and your kids, you might as well dismiss you from this. We're not going to get any money from you because you're now a very sympathetic person. I don't know exactly what it was, but I think that is the reason it happened if he did it. And maybe this is just the prosecutor / lawyer in me. To me, the motive is just sort of an interesting thing. Well, that's interesting. Well, that's why I did it. That's, because I'm looking at all the evidence, and I'm looking at the fact he was at the kennel 4 minutes before they were shot, that he lied about that he's the reason they were there in the first place, that he's the only person who would have known they were going to be there, because Maggie was normally down at the beach and Paul was all over the place, and he got them there, and he would have been on the property when the shots happened. That's the other thing. He would have been there. If he didn't do it, he was there when shotgun blasts are going off and AR-15s are getting fired. And those are both very loud things. And to me, it's just impossible for me to believe that he's not responsible for this, or lying about something very strange. Like, you have to basically, in my mind, concoct a really conspiratorial thing where, as somebody on another podcast we were on said, like, the Mexican cartel shows up and kills them in front of him to send a message. And so he can't ever tell what happened because he'll be next, and it'll be even worse than going to prison for the rest of his life. Like, you have to believe something like that happened to think he didn't do it, in my mind. And I'm sorry, I don't buy that for a second. And that's not reasonable to me. And so it's not reasonable doubt to me. And so if I were on the jury, I would convict, but I'm biased because I'm a prosecutor.
What do you think, Alice?
I think that's right. I mean, the reason I was kind of, bearing the lead there is that obviously motive is not part of the elements, and people get hung up on the motive. Of course, attorneys all know that the best story wins, and that may be the case here. We'll see how it plays out. I don't know that the story has been told greatly, because I agree with Brett. It's rare that I would see such good motive for someone like Alec, right? I mean, this powerful man with seemingly everything on this like beautiful hunting lodge property. What would trigger this man to kill his son and wife and make it believable? Well, someone who's had kind of like a century of power and money, and it's about to be ripped out from under him. It's not really about just the money. It's about his very identity, right? We've seen all these documentaries, all these interviews about who the Murdaughs are. It's not just money. It is the perception that they are gods in the Low Country. And so he's not just losing money. He's not just losing, millions of dollars, because money is money. He is losing the very definition of who he is, and who I think he is. That attack on his id is much too much for him. And that would, in my mind, make him snap. That's the motive part. I'm not sure it's being conveyed quite yet. Maybe they'll bring it together in the closing, but that's powerful to me. That's separate and aside. So if I can't tell a good story on motive, and I do think there's a good story for motive, I would focus on the evidence, because that's the elements here of whether he committed the murders. And I think the evidence is really overwhelming. At least it's a tough case to defend against, right? And that's why you talk about motive, because the question of why would this man who has everything seemingly kill his own flesh and blood? That's a really, really hard question to answer for 99.9% of our society. Thank God. And so that's kind of a mixed answer, but I do think there's a good motive. I'm not sure it's being told in the best way possible, because I don't think it's just money. It's the money that indicates who he is. It is the Murdaughs since 1900, right? I mean, he's carried this name. This name matters. His family is the definition. They are gods, and they're about to be shot down from their throne of goddom. And that is why he snaps, not just money.
And that's the way you also turn what Bob and I were saying earlier about Buster, because Buster is the continuation of that legacy. So yeah, he was willing to die for Buster because it was all falling apart for him, and he knew that. And the only way to save his legacy, save his good name, and keep all that going was to take himself out, so Buster could sort of continue it without the shame and everything else. So yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think Alice nails it.
So I mean, for me, it's not a great motive, and I hear what you guys are saying, and I don't disagree. But the reason, and because it is not an element, but in this type of case, it takes the form of an element, because you have to answer that question of why would he do this? Like, because of that legacy, that kind of like the essence of who the Murdaughs are in that county and who they've been in that county for 100 years. And, they could put a parade of people up there talking about, the kind of guy that Alec was. Everyone loved him until they didn't. Everyone to a person was like, he was kind to my father. We considered him to be like a surrogate father. I mean, it was person after person. So this guy wasn't like some kind of like scumbag until it became outed that he was. So in terms of like having to bring that motive to the jury in order to kind of like describe to them why he would do this, why would this man who clearly loves his family above all else, because that's what the defense is always doing. With any of the fact witnesses, it's always how much did he love his family? They were always taking trips. Did he ever miss a game of any of his kids? All the stuff that you'd expect a loving father to do, right? And they established that. And I think that it's a tenuous motive, because what the defense is going to do, if this opioid thing is true, and like I know people that I've had clients that have been addicted to Oxycontin. It's heroin. It's prescribed heroin. If he has been writing checks and taking pills to the tune of $50,000 a week on Oxycontin, this guy is not the Alec Murdaugh that everyone has known for their entire lives. And if it's been going on for as long as he can remember, 11, 12, 15 years, whatever it is, that is a major factor in terms of like where his mindset is. Because like in terms of that argument with respect to, okay, if he was willing to go so far as to hire somebody to kill him in order to, have Buster collect on the insurance policy, that's what he would do for his family. I'm making the same argument that why didn't he just do it with respect to Maggie and Paul too? Like it's nonsensical to me that he would do it for Buster, but he wouldn't have done it for his wife and his other son. So it's like that part of it, like it's a disconnect for me. And if it's true, because that's why I was saying they have to lean into the roadside shooting at this point, because like they can make that connection. Like why would he do it for Buster, but he wouldn't have done it for Maggie and Paul? And I think that the bigger picture is that he didn't realize, like, I think because of the opioids, that affects the way that you think, in terms of being able to think like a rational human being. I think if he was doing that much pill popping at that point, that there were very, very few lucid moments during the course of his days and nights. And, I think when it came to the point on September 4th, when he finally it dawned on him that he was losing all of it. And like you said, Alice, it's not just the money, it's everything. His law career is done. The money is gone. Like that was after Maggie and Paul had been shot, like a few months after, you know what I'm saying? So at that point, like, I don't think at that juncture, when Maggie and Paul are killed, that he thought that I think he still thought he was going to be able to weasel his way out of it. I honestly do. And, so like, and that has to be their argument in terms of, because really their motive is that he was trying to buy himself a little time. Like that's the part of the motive that I just don't buy, that like, oh, well, I'm going to kill my son and my wife in order to divert people's attention away from all my financial crimes. And then I'll hope they'll magically disappear. I'm not buying that. It's too much of a stretch for me. And then when you're going to turn it around, because believe me, there are going to be witnesses about his opioid addiction, like en masse, like in terms of the defense that they're going to put on. I mean, it's just, so I don't know. Like, I mean, it's a tough motive, and I get what you're saying, Brett. I mean, like, I clearly, I can understand the motive, and I don't think that it's nonsensical by any stretch. You know, I can see how it might play out that way, you know, but in terms of just kind of like everything in the totality of the circumstances, I don't know if I buy it, man.
You know, this is kind of funny because this is why motive and really all of 404B can be dangerous because, like I said, it's important, but I buy the motive because that's why he did it. It's kind of like if you took your life story to A&E to make a biography and they were like, oh, we just don't buy it. And you're like, but that's my life. That's what really happened. They're like, it's just too unbelievable. We can't do it. Right. I mean,
you can't write this stuff.
The reason I know he did it is because the evidence pretty clearly shows he did it. And now it's just trying to figure out why he did it. And like I said,
that reminded me, Brett, one of the things you were talking about. All right. So let's talk about the timeline.
Okay.
Like we don't really know the time of death. We know that.
Yeah, we do.
Like, I mean, we're building it through like,
we know it to like a couple minutes.
I don't know, man. Like, you know, you've got this situation where you've got Paul's phone dying and like remember before the door was opened, like one of their last witnesses was going to be the cell phone dude who like was really trying to like, and you know, as prosecutors, you're trying to kind of strategically place your witnesses in ways that you feel are going to be most effective and what you want the jurors to remember as they go into the defense's case in chief. And he theoretically thinking that the thing was supposed to be done today. You know, they had no idea. They must have been scrambling to get all these witnesses to say, all right, we're back on for the roadside shooting. You know what I mean? So it's like you've got this guy coming on and basically saying, we're showing Paul's history of when his battery dies and how long he waits before he goes to charge his phone as kind of like an indicator that's when they died, because otherwise Paul would have gone and charged his phone. It's awful tough to convict somebody on that.
Well, it's not just that though.
I think it's both their phones.
Yeah,
I think
exactly.
The fact that it's both their phones and they go dark within like 15, 20 seconds of each other when it had been on all the time. But before I go into that timeline, because I do think that's powerful, but this is where it gets fun because then we get to be prosecutor defense. Really quick on that motive though, because I know the chat's blowing up with people agreeing with both of us. So in other words, people are disagreeing with both of us, which is great. And also goes toward your hung jury opinion. I think where we differ is I don't think he did any of this for anyone. He didn't do this for Buster. He didn't do it for Paul. He didn't do it for Maggie. This only has to do with him. And he is, I think, a classic narcissist. And we have theories about, why he ultimately killed his wife and son, but I don't actually think the roadside suicide for hire was for Buster. I think it's a great story, and boy, am I going to lean into that if I'm the defense, but I think it had nothing to do with him. I think if he was trying to kill himself, it was because he was trying to kill himself, and he's not man enough to pull the trigger. And he wanted sympathy because even in death, he wants to be a god. And what a way to go out, because all your crimes can be erased if you were some like sad man who had his brains blown out and probably was the same person who killed your family, because what bad luck for this family. I think he wanted to go out a god, just like he was getting shot down from the throne of being a god. So I don't actually think Buster has anything to do with it. Sorry, Buster. Your dad may not love you that much. Because I think he's that big of a scumbag, to be honest.
I mean, like, if he was an opioid addict, if he was an Oxycontin addict, you lose yourself. Like, that narcissism goes away. All it becomes is I want my next hit. I need my next pill. I want to be high. Like, it's like that. That drug is like that.
Broadcast is live.
There you go.
Live. Look at that.
All right, we're rocking
But
and
the one
rolling.
thing, I still can't see the number of people. Can you see the number of people?
I can't.
I can't either. I don't know where it is. Maybe it'll show up at some point. Oh, it's 117. 117.
Nice. Where do you look?
It's a little eyeball, and it says 117.
Yeah, I can't see that either.
It's because we have the link to be. We're not looking. We're the studio.
Just you, man.
Can I say?
I mean,
just us. Just
I
us.
can
Hello, can you guys
I
hear
can see
us?
the chats, though.
They can hear
us.
Yeah.
Yes. They can hear us.
Work takes up most of your time. That's why you should use Stamps.com to save time with your mailing and shipping. Stamps.com will simplify your postage needs and add valuable time back into your workday, so you have flexibility to focus on more important things. Stamps.com can handle your mailing and shipping needs with rates up to 88% off UPS and USPS. Send invoices, checks, certified mail, packages, and anything else you need to keep your business running with Stamps.com. If you sell online, connecting with every major marketplace and shopping cart is easy. Plus, you can schedule package pickups through their dashboard and automatically see your cheapest and fastest shipping options from different carriers with Stamps.com's Rate Advisor. Add more flexibility to your workday with Stamps.com. Go to Stamps.com/program to sign up for a special offer. No contract, cancel anytime. That's Stamps.com/program.